There we go.
Ooh, right on cue. I just hit the record button and in pops Julie. Um, all right, welcome everybody to the end of August, start of Labor Day weekend edition of Legal Tech Week, the show where we talk about the what's going on in legal tech this week. And we don't really have a whole lot to talk about today. It's actually been kind of a quiet week, and I'm sure a lot of people are possibly off starting their Labor Day weekend already. So those of you who are with us live today, appreciate it. Otherwise, as those who are watching it recorded, well, you're missing out on all the fun. I'm Bob Ambrogi. I have a blog called Law Sites and a podcast called Law Next. And the panelists we have today are so, Julie, I was just saying, I actually was thinking Labor Day was not a holiday in Canada, and so you'd be a sure show. And then it turns out it is a holiday in Canada. What do I know? But anyway, welcome.
Welcome. Yes, this is one of the holidays we share together in solidarity. I'm Julie Sobowale. I write about legal tech in Canada for the Canadian Bar Association, Canadian Lawyer, a fun magazine called The Walrus, and other places. And happy pre-Labor Day weekend to all our listeners.
The Walrus is a fun magazine. I never heard of it until you started talking about it, but it's got some good stuff. And who's next? Victor, you want to go next?
Sure. My name is Victor Lee. I'm assistant managing editor for the ABA Journal. Happy Labor Day, everyone. I guess for Canada, they use the U. So
Makes it a longer holiday that way. Uh, and Steve.
Hey, Steve Embry. I write the blog Tech Law Crossroads, and I also write for Above the Law.
And Joe.
Joe Patrice from Above the Law. I have a podcast called Thinking Like a Lawyer, and I am happy to be doing some labor on Labor Day weekend here.
Okay. And Steve didn't have a story. Julie, did you have a story today? I don't even know. You didn't put anything in the log, so we'll have to figure out whether you've got something to talk about. But uh,
I
it,
have old things to talk about. I have an article about old news, just the biggest legal tech news of the year, but we can talk about it later.
um, old news is good. That's fine. Sometimes it takes us around to get a while to get around to things. Where was my blog? I was actually gonna, I didn't even put this on the log, but I ended up writing this thing hurriedly last night and posting it this morning when I realized it's the 20th anniversary of Katrina,
Hmm.
only because I went back, I was like searching my blog, just to like search Katrina, my blog, and then it reminded me that there had been this whole kind of interesting response from the legal tech community when Hurricane Katrina struck, and it kind of brought me back because 20 years ago, there's a lot of people I think in the whole legal tech world who think legal tech didn't exist more than 10 years ago or something, and the idea that there is a community around legal tech, again, I think a lot of people think that this is kind of a recent evolution, recent incarnation. But it was a reminder of the fact that there was a really strong legal tech community 20 years ago, and frankly, even farther back than that, because in talking about that, I remembered how many in the legal tech community responded after September 11th, even before Katrina. And so I did a post today just kind of talking about the way the legal tech community responded. It was devastating to obviously to New Orleans and to people in the surrounding parishes, and it was such a horrible event when it happened. We were the images. I'm sure anybody who was around at that time just remember the images of the flooding and people trying to get into the Superdome, which was kind of an overflow. Overflow. That's not the right word for a health
Mhm.
facility. And But immediately, people in the tech community started trying to put together resources to help lawyers be able to practice. As lawyers were fleeing out of New Orleans, they were basically providing them free office space and resources, helping those who were still around there with resources. and also trying to help, self-represented litigants who might need help with legal problems. And it was a really kind of an interesting response, I thought. And it also brought back for me memories of Ross Codner, which did any of you guys know Ross Codner?
Mm,
No.
no.
Ross was like I wonder if anybody in the chat remembers Ross, because Ross was giant of the legal tech. I mean, in the world of legal tech, there was like Ross, and then there was everybody else. He was a legal tech consultant um, uh, who was probably one. He was always writing in the ABA journal, writing in all the ABA publications, speaking at every single conference there was. A very well regarded speaker at ABA Tech Show back in the day when he was around. He died early, died in his 50s. Um,
Mm.
at ABA Tech Show, he would put on this event. Um, Not ABA endorsed his own thing, but it would always be piggybacked on ABA Tech Show. That was like the invite only event that you would try to get into, and people who would go to this event, it would be a really fancy thing, and they would all get these swag bags that were like Academy Award swag bags. I mean, stuffed with, in those days, boxes of software and hardware devices and all this kind of crazy stuff that you would need an extra suitcase to get home from Chicago with. He had a little bit of P.T. Barnum in him. He was quite a showman, but a big heart. And he organized really this kind of major effort to marshal together resources and volunteers and whatever else to respond to the Katrina thing. So it was fun to look back on it, and then it also I kind of closed the article with ruminating a little bit about just like, you know, do we still have that kind of community today, or has the legal tech community become a little too sophisticated, a little too polished to kind of respond in that same way? Maybe a little too big. I don't know. I did get people reminding me, like Kristen Sande on LinkedIn, reminding me that yeah, there have been responses to the wildfires in LA and any other number of events that have come along since then. So hopefully that spirit continues. End of rambling about that.
Yeah, I remember
Um,
Hard to believe that.
I
Hard
was
to believe
still,
that was 20 years ago.
Yeah.
yeah.
yeah, I was just 1 year out of law school because I went to law school in New Orleans, and so like
Yeah.
so I was in the Superdome in 2004, so I guess it was right before right before um it became a temporary refuge for people, refuge for people. And yeah, is there was a time in my life where I thought I might stay there after graduation. Um, but then obviously, circumstances took me elsewhere. But yeah, I always kind of wondered, like, man, what would have happened if I'd stayed? And like, would I still be here? So yeah, it was definitely it was haunting to see that, because it's just, I mean, and even now, it's like there's some places. I think even right afterward, there were some places where like you couldn't tell anything happened, and some places that were just completely decimated. So it was really just kind of luck of the draw almost.
Yeah. I missed the word perfect reference, but yeah, Ross would have been a word perfect guy for sure. Back in the day, he was probably on word perfect's payroll, I would bet. I think long after Microsoft started making inroads, those little gift swag bags you get would always have a box of the latest version of Word Perfect in it. In those days, they gave you software in boxes on disks that you would then load onto your computer.
Floppy
Uh,
disks.
Floppy disks, or those little, do they call those little blue ones floppy disks? I guess they did.
Yeah, I
What do
could
you-
never figure out why they were called floppy when they weren't floppy at all.
The ones before that, the original
Yeah,
ones were floppy.
the 5-inch ones were.
Oh,
Yeah.
Are
were
you,
they? Okay.
so that's interesting. So you all weren't using punch cards for everything?
Yeah, I had the mainframe
Yeah.
here in my office. Yep.
ENIAC.
Yeah. Um, all right. So, did we have any actual news to talk about? Joe, you said you had something on Harvey. Is that right? Or did that come out? I didn't see if your story. You mentioned you were going to publish a
Yeah.
story. Did it publish? Yeah.
Yes, I did. Yep. So I did a thing. Harvey announced that it has a law school partnership with Stanford, UCLA, NYU, and Notre Dame. Then immediately after they made this announcement, Notre Dame put out a thing saying they're the first ones to ever work with Harvey. So I don't quite know. Like, I guess they never were told about the other three schools. I'm not sure. Or maybe they just think they're the world's most special snowflake. It is college football season. Anyway, the the interesting thing about it for me is, we go to a lot of these briefings for these new AI tools, and a question that I think at some point all of us have asked in these sorts of briefings, and I know I think the first person I remember asking it was Gina Grady, like a year or so ago, of some company, like, are you going to start offering this for free to law schools? Just kind of a common question. Are you going to follow that model that Lexis and Westlaw always have of, like, let's give free access and get them hooked young? And the answers have ranged from no to, well, I mean, I don't know. It's like a lot of concerns. It's very expensive. We're not sure. Like, a lot of hemming and hawing about the idea of giving AI with the costs associated with it for free to law students. So Harvey doing this is interesting to me because it starts putting some pressure on those folks, right? Like, now, part of it is that tokens are getting cheaper and all that sort of thing, but now that they're getting in on this, you got to think that their competitors, either direct competitors or just tangential competitors who have some AI aspect to their product and don't give that to law students now, might be kind of compelled to do it.
I get confused on what Harvey. I don't fully understand what that means because I always think of Harvey. One of Harvey's, one of the reasons they keep saying we're working largely exclusively with big firms these days is that they talk about the fact that they train against the firm's data and just some not customized per se, but their platform. Maybe customization is the right word. Each sort of customer of theirs, they work with them to against train it against their internal data, make sure that it's working against their data. So I wonder, how does that work on a law school basis? What are they giving the law students access to? I wonder. I think there is like a Harvey Light or a Harvey, it's not the full install or something. Not install is not the right word, but not the full version. You know?
Yeah. I just thought it was interesting that
Yeah.
we're getting to the point where we do that, because it has become, like, I didn't really even realize what it had become like in law schools. Like, when I was going to law school, you got the latest and greatest that Lexis and Westlaw have to offer. And my new understanding is they have, lighter versions that they give the students now, because they don't want it, all the bells and whistles. They're like, we don't need to give this premium product. And that has so far included the idea of these AI tools. So even if it's a Harvey Light, it is, it's crossing that threshold of, hey, let's get into these law schools.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's interesting.
Although I think I've said before, based on what we saw of Harvey at ILTA, I wonder if they're going to gradually be moving more to the mid-sized market than they have been. They certainly had a big presence at ILTA. You couldn't turn around without seeing the word Harvey.
Yep.
Yeah. They continue to confound me. I
Yeah,
don't know.
same
I'm
here.
Same.
I'm
The mystery company.
yeah.
If you can explain to me Harvey, then, maybe we can go buy
Yeah.
lottery tickets as well, because I don't understand. I don't
Well,
understand.
it's Brian, but Brian, he's not in the audience today. That we do have a regular viewer who usually is here live, who uses it at his firm and has talked about it in the chat. So I would have asked him, but he's not here, it doesn't look like.
Yeah, I mean, certainly certainly talked to firms that are using it, but there are all, I mean, people at firms that are using it, but they are all large firms at this point, and that's been very deliberate on Harvey's part.
Right.
And yeah, I think Steve, I think you're right. I mean, they did say they haven't even talked to me in a while, but the last time I talked to them was probably like a year ago when they said they were definitely going to be broadening the market. They were going to be moving more into the mid-sized firm market. They were going to be coming out with a sort of different versions of their product for different audiences. So that was all on the roadmap, but that was also the point when they said they were going to be building out they were never going to partner with a legal research company because they were going to build out their own case law collection and build out their own legal research function. And we know what happened to that. So who knows? All right. That cue Jimmy Stewart come in and do Harvey imitations or something.
Well, yeah, that's always the favorite game, right? Which Harvey are they talking about? And I think they think they're like some character from Suits, whereas a lot of us think they're the Invisible Rabbit,
Yeah.
or maybe Harvey
Harvey
Birdman,
Dent.
but
Harvey
somewhere.
Dent.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh, Harvey
Harvey
Dent.
Dent
Yeah,
is
yeah,
on. Yeah, there we go. There we go. Yeah.
yeah.
We'll never know. All right. Well, we've almost exhausted our list of stories there with that one. But fortunately, Victor has a story too. You
Oh yeah.
want to?
Sorry, I'm trying to copy the link and do this at the same time.
I,
Yeah. So basically, yeah. So this week, University of Chicago released a press. Sorry, I'm having trouble copying this thing. Okay. So this week, the University of Chicago released a press release saying that they're launching an AI lab, which will allow students and professors to like create legal technology tools to help people who need it. I think what the project that they named was to help people navigate landlord tenant disputes, which Chicago is probably a good place to start. Although but I think Kimball Dean Parker, who well known to people in the field, is involved in this, and I mean it's probably it's a good use of it's a good use of technology. But what surprised me was that it was Chicago, like because they're not look, I mean they're a great school, one of the best in the country by any stretch of the imagination, but they're not typically known as like a school that is in this area. I mean, usually the school in Chicago that people associate with technology and like innovation is Kent, which so the fact that it's UChicago I thought was interesting. I mean, they obviously have resources and they have people there, which and the brain power and whatnot. So, Kimball's alma mater. That probably explains it. But yeah, so I thought it was interesting, and I mean, the landlord tenant issues here are obviously very important. I mean, I think Chicago is not as crazy as a market as like some other places, but things are still pretty bad here as far as rent and like and things like that. So I can see that helping a lot of people potentially. So it's interesting, and then and obviously they're going to work on other tools throughout the as things go on. I think this is the first thing they're going to work on. So yeah, I thought it's a good use of resources, and it's probably something that hopefully other schools will do. And yeah, like I said, it was really more of a surprise that it was Chicago and not and not some other schools here in the city. So good for
well,
them.
he did it. He did it first at BYU. He had the Law X lab at BYU, which is essentially this is the same idea as what he did there, and that was what I think Nick commenting in the office, but that was back in like 2018, 2017, something like that. That he did that, and I actually had the opportunity back then to go. I was out at BU. I got to sit in on that class as they were kind of working through um, the earliest iterations of what eventually became SoloSuit, which is now an independent company and product that's out there in the market. But um, yeah, it sounds like an extension of that. It's also interesting that whole announcement came like right after that announcement was just well at the end of July was the news came out about 650 getting acquired by Paychex, which of course Kimball was the CEO and basically founder of 650 together with Wilson Sonsini. So I don't know if there's anything about the timing there in terms of his transitioning. I don't, as far as I know, he's still with 650, but I'm not sure. But yeah, I think it's a really clever thing, and look forward to seeing what's coming out of it. And yeah, I agree with you, Victor, that more law schools should emulate that model.
This is a good thing for kids to do for kids. It's a good thing for students to do kids. Sorry, it's a good thing for students to do too. It's like it gives them I mean if they don't feel like doing like other programs there, it's a good program for them to do, and plus to learn about technology, which we've talked about a lot on the show. So yeah, I mean hopefully it'll encourage some people to to do this, and especially if they can't like do like one of the clinical programs and whatnot. So.
Yeah.
This is the first big one at University of Chicago. Because I mean, I agree with you. Like, this is a very Kent thing to happen. But I'm just wondering, like, if they're going to like the beginning of more, or if they've already like had some other things in the mix before this that maybe I missed.
I'm not sure.
As far as this exact, Kent, they have like, I don't know, if they have like the same exact thing, like where it's like where it's like a, and also, it's obviously like, there's some marketing stuff here too, like, like talking about sandboxes and talking about like, it's kind of like an incubator program almost as opposed to anything else. And so, I don't know if they have like formal programs like this at other schools. Maybe someone, in the comments will be able to educate me on that. But obviously it's just taking that step is a pretty big deal concerning the school.
Yeah. And Nick gives a shout out to Suffolk, which of course their lab has been doing a lot of good stuff in this regard. And Mark Lauritsen is also in the chat. Has been a teacher, instructor at Suffolk, among the many things he's done over the years. So that's good. It's funny that first Law X class I sat in on the first year of it when they were working on Solo Suit. One of the students in that class actually then went on to become the CEO of Solo Suit and still is the CEO of Solo Suit. So he went right from law school to basically taking that project into a real product, into a real company. So it's interesting. I remember talking to the then dean at BYU, or maybe it was actually Kimball I talked to, but the sort of raising the question of whether a lot of the students who went through that lab were looking at careers in legal tech. At that point, my understanding was they weren't. I mean, they thought it was interesting and it was fun to learn about it, but they basically wanted to become lawyers, and that's the road they were on. But I wonder now how many more. It's got to be a lot more common now that law students are getting involved in these courses with the deliberate intention to be able to pursue a career in legal tech in some way, I would think.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have the program here in Toronto with I think it's TMU now. I wrote about this a couple of years ago or last year. A smaller school, the University of New Brunswick, they have a program kind of similar to what you guys are talking about here. It's I forget the AI program that um, but the students that I interviewed who were in the program, they were like, yeah, this has completely changed my career trajectory as a lawyer. I no longer want to practice in the way that I thought I would. I want to do this instead. And talking to a lot of students who have gone through these similar types of programs here in Canada, that's exactly what's happening. Just thinking of what Samuel's doing at Queen's, and some other stuff out west. So I think as law schools continue to do this more, this whole idea of like alternative legal careers, if anyone is still using those terms, I think is going to become much more commonplace because some of these programs have actually been around for quite a while and are still popular to students, which, doesn't surprise me. So it makes sense to me that University of Chicago would go down this route because there's other Chicago schools that are actually, been doing this work for quite a while. And besides the recruitment and marketing, it actually kind of fills in that niche for schools to be saying, oh, yeah, of course we cater to big law and others, but we also cater to big tech as well, because some students are going to come into law school wanting to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like to kind of piggyback off that. It's not. I mean, if you sign up for one of these types of programs where you're creating apps, it's not like you don't learn about the law. If anything, you probably learn more about the law because you have to program it into the tool. So you're probably going to be even more careful because you don't want to mess up and do something that you're not supposed to. So yeah, I mean, yeah, I think it's a good skill to have regardless, and it'll help you even if you decide, okay, I don't want to do tech, I want to go work on landlord tenant issues full time. I was like, well, you have a great base for it.
Yes, I think Kat Moon at Vanderbilt has been doing something similar for a while as well. I'd written an article and she commented that pointed out that whatever I'd said in the article they were already doing. So I thought I better get that in so I don't get chastised again.
All right. Julie, did you have a story you want to talk about, or shall we just
We can very
make things up?
briefly. Yeah, we can very briefly. Like I'm so quick to the draw. I finally wrote about Clio. I've been writing about a lot of things that will come out
Their
this.
founding, or
Yes, the founding of the company. Yes, finally, Joshua and I finally got everybody in place. So yeah, so it was a great excuse to talk to Sarah Glassmeyer, which is always great to chat with her. And because I did the story a little bit later, I was actually able to put in a little bit more perspective on what they're doing. So put in some not content, put in some context about bulk legal data and some other things that are kind of, as part of this. Sarah had some really interesting points about acquisitions. She thought Bloomberg Law will be the next big whale to catch, which is still percolating in my head who would want to buy Bloomberg Law. But yeah, in case
mm,
anyone wants to read the Canadian perspective of this Canadian company merging with VLEX, there it is.
interesting. The
Yeah.
Bloomberg Law. Did anybody notice when those of us who were, well, actually, we were all at ILTA, we all had briefings with LexisNexis, but now that I think about it, we were all on different briefings. We weren't all in the same one. But the one I was in with Niki, and who else was the, anyway, at some point, the president of LexisNexis did a little zinger on Bloomberg Law in the sense that we were asking about Harvey, I think, and he said something along the lines of, well, building a case law database is difficult work, as Bloomberg Law has learned over
Yeah.
the years.
Yeah.
So,
I think I was in there because I remember that
yeah,
comment.
okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember
Or maybe he
just
rehearsed it and just said it in all of our briefings.
Well, that could be.
I'll say going back, before I was in, when I was still practicing, I was asked by Bloomberg to do some testing with that product when they were first building it. And I just remembered thinking, this is so cool. Like, you're actually doing stuff that the other legal research companies aren't doing. This is amazing. All this stuff is great. And then they're like, yeah, no, we're working on it. It'll come out soon. And then they just didn't come out. And it just like kept dragging on and dragging on. And by the time I saw the product on the market, Westlaw and Lexis all had doing the same things. But like Bloomberg showed it to me before any of them. I was like, Bloomberg had an opportunity. They just, is it the perfect is the enemy the good or whatever? But they just dilly dallied and
Which product was that? The
just the initial like drive where they because I got
oh,
invited because they had a bunch of people that I'd worked with from law school who they'd hired to do their back when it was just a warehouse full of lawyers trying to catch
yeah,
up to where
yeah,
Lexis
yeah,
and
yeah,
Westlaw had been.
yeah, yeah. Run at the time by Louis Andriozzi, who had formerly been the CEO of LexisNexis and jumped over to Bloomberg to lead that effort. Um,
Did
yeah, that was
did Sarah
interesting.
have a Julie? Did Sarah have a particular reason she thought Bloomberg might be next, or?
Yeah, she did. Because of the data that they have regarding mergers and acquisitions in the US. So
Hmm.
Bloomberg Law has like Joe was saying, they haven't done a good job in keeping up with like Westlaw and others in terms of all of that. But the data they still have, the information they still have, and is very valuable. And so I think what she was saying is, if someone really big just wanted to start from scratch essentially and say, I'm just gonna gobble up your information, um,
Hmm.
and take it from there. And she thought they were really the last big major database that would be attractive to do that
Hmm,
with. Because
that's
mergers and
interesting.
acquisitions, right,
Oh,
is
It's a
attractive.
big deal. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
but
but
would
I'm
it be
not sure the
independent?
buyer would be. That's the only
Would
thing.
it be independent from their from like would it be like would it be just Bloomberg Law separate from like the rest of the because from what I understand is like I mean and again this is where Gene would come in handy. It's basically their terminals basically pay for everything else at
Yeah.
that company. So would they just be spinning out Bloomberg Law and then nothing else, or would it be yeah? So I guess yeah that'd be my question about that.
Hmm. But I guess if an attractive deal came about, that I don't know. I don't know enough about Bloomberg's global business strategy, but at the same time, I'm just thinking of the stuff they do in the financial markets and other things that would be way more lucrative. Like that's my guess, right? Compared to Bloomberg Law.
Yeah, I'll say, and my information is very outdated, but I used to know a lot about their business model because in the like 11 years ago or so, I was in interviews with them and stuff. And so I learned a little bit about how things were going. And it seemed at the time that I'm surprised that Bloomberg Law still exists now because at the time they were building it out and building it out. And then Mike came back from the mayor's office, and rather than go into retirement like everybody had kind of hoped, he decided, I'm taking over again. And the whole company, from what I gathered, just became purge everything that's not terminals. Terminals is all we care about. That's all I understand. It's all terminals, terminals. And I'm shocked they didn't sell off all sorts of stuff at that point.
Maybe they just haven't had the right offer. Because
Yeah.
Sarah convinced me. Like she made a lot of sense in terms of the data that they have, the fact that they don't really have we all know they're behind compared to the other competitors. Like that makes a lot of sense to me. So, and I'm seeing in the chat
Wow.
about the terminals. Yeah, that makes sense. So I think they just haven't had the right offer, right?
Yeah.
Just
Wow. A
pasted my
2010 article.
2010 article, Can It Be a Contender? Which I then got a call not long at some point after Andriozzi took over there. He called me up and said, "Your article's a blueprint for us to improve this service." And unfortunately, it wasn't exactly, and he didn't last long, very long. So, but
It was a blueprint. It's just they didn't follow it.
yeah, well, no, it wasn't really a blueprint either. But um, I would be really surprised if that got acquired, just because I've always understood Bloomberg as a broad organization, their business strategy to be very proprietary, and I just they don't seem like a company that would be interested in spinning off their legal research service. Their legal research service is part of the reason so many large firms have it is because it does build off of and on top of the financial data and financial resources that they have, and they're kind of really kind of closely integrated in a lot of ways. That's the one unique. That's what makes Bloomberg Law unique is its integration with that financial data. And so I don't know. I don't know whether it could even be the same. This, whether the value would still be there if it spun off or got acquired by somebody else without the rest of the package. And Bloomberg just seems to have this sort of like stubbornness to it, like as a company that they just like they want to do things their proprietary way, and they're not really looking to partner with anybody else out there. But they've had the interesting model. I mean, they've always had one of the things that they've always done consistently is one flat price. Back when librarians were always complaining about pricing by Westlaw in particular, and Lexis as well, where you never knew what you were paying for or what you were getting. Bloomberg kept it nice and simple. What you get it all, one price, you get it all, no questions asked, which made a lot of sense, I always thought.
Sounds
And
like
correct me if I'm wrong,
a
but
natural.
Bloomberg himself stepped aside, right? Or he's not, or is he still there, but he's not actively involved anymore. Or?
I can't remember. I think,
Um,
yeah, because I think when he tried to run for president again, he then ultimately left.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I think he stepped aside for sure. 'Cause, yeah.
Well, because there was that point where Liz Warren dropped an anvil on his head in a
Yeah,
debate. And I think
he
after
never
that, it
quite
was hard
recovered,
for him,
never quite recovered from that.
hard for him to kind of keep going after all that. What's with all these NDAs? Uh-oh.
so
I've
Julie, did
forgotten
your
about
article
that.
about Clio think that company has any future, or
Uh,
I don't know, this cloud business. I don't know if that's it's going to
Yeah,
work or
it'll
not.
never last.
I don't
It'll never
know.
last.
Cloud services is like in the sky, those clouds? I don't know.
All right. No, but seriously, did you get any insights in terms of what people are thinking about the whole VLEX Clio acquisition merger
Yeah.
meeting?
I missed your show where Joshua was here, but talked a bit about access to justice stuff as well.
Hmm.
And then talked a little bit about like Canada and access to case law is a little bit different because we have Canley and how different is it really and how much of an impact it would make. Mixed feelings about this, about how much of an impact this merger will be, which I found super interesting altogether. But yeah, yeah, because I think some people were really hoping this would be like opening the door a lot more because we all know how Clio and VLEX are. Just talking about law schools, for example, and the partnerships they've had with schools and other access to justice orgs over the years. So I think people are really hopeful about that. But in terms of transformative change about like legal practice, because that's what Clio is really about, and VLEX as well, I think people are cautiously optimistic that there'll be like some major changes. So I don't know. To me, it's still a big thing because this is like a giant juggernaut getting more giant. Boy, it's such an elegant way to put that. Um, especially as we see with Steven's article in Billable Hour, right? Like, like I'm segueing for you, Bob, but like, yeah, because I do think there's some hope, like for what we've been talking about over the years about alternative business models and alternative ways of doing things in legal practice and not having to use the billable hour.
Yeah. Um,
It'll never
Steve,
go away.
Steve didn't even volunteer to talk about his billable hour story, but we can do that. But actually, I'm just going to mention while we're kind of on this, kind of a sort of tangentially related story I did this week, which was about the latest investment in this company called Bench IQ. And the reason it's relevant to what we're talking about is that just as Bloomberg Law has kind of a unique data set that sets it apart from other legal research companies, Bench IQ is trying to develop that too, and kind of really going off into an area that nobody else has quite done yet. And this is the company that is actually founded by Jimo Oviagale. As long as I've known the guy, I've always mangled his name. But he's the former co-founder of Ross Intelligence. And I know Andrew is often in our audience. I'm not sure he's here today, the other co-founder of Ross Intelligence. Andrew's moved off into the medical field, but Gmo is started this company back in like February 2024. I think they got started, and I wrote about them then. But what's interesting is what they are trying to do is to create a platform that predicts judicial decision-making patterns, and what differentiates them from some of the kind of judicial analytics platforms out there is they're going beyond um, published court opinions or even written decisions off of dockets into things like judges' verbal bench rulings and other indicators drawn from dockets and other materials of how judges rule on different kinds of issues. So their arguments they can make a much more complete picture of how a judge is likely to rule on a particular issue, and what the judge's patterns look like around those issues. So they just raised, it was just, what was it, a $10 million seed, not a lot of money by some of the standards we talk about in this show. They had previously raised a pre-seed, but they say they already have four of the top five AmLaw 100 firms as customers and a number of other customers. I still haven't seen it in action or had a chance to try it out, but I'm curious to do that. I hope I get to do that at some point soon. But I think it's an interesting idea, and again, it's sort of similar to what we were just saying with Bloomberg, in that it will be a unique set of data, or they claim they already have this unique set of data that they can build off of. So that was
I
interesting.
have a I have a really personally, I have a really refined and sophisticated product that can tell you exactly how Clarence Thomas is going to rule on these cases. And is somebody willing to give me $10 million for that? I'm open because I can tell you what he's going to do.
You
I'll
could
throw in
probably
$10, Joe.
it probably wouldn't take a you could if you got a little seed money, you could add you could add Alito
I
to
can
it
add a
too.
Lido to it. Yeah, I'm on
Yeah.
Well,
it.
well, no, you got to buy an RV first. You got to buy like one of those gigantic like RVs, and then
Yeah.
that way you could really influence them.
So quoting from
And
the live chat here, I see Fantasy SCOTUS mentioned. That definitely was a thing for a while because they did
I remember
have
that.
that device. What they call it? Was it Marshall? It was named after some justice. I think it was Marshall was what the name of their algorithm was that was trying to predict, and of course predicting the more mundane cases like how are they going to rule in this ERISA case where like all of their actual political leanings go out the window. And they had a competition, I remember, for it for a while, and I got like $100 gift card or something for it because I like came in second or third against the machine. So yeah, it was fun.
They probably could get pretty good at predicting the six justice majority too.
What's the guy? There is the guy out there that does all the predictive analytics around Supreme Court cases.
Yeah,
What it's
Adam.
called? Adam, yeah,
Yeah,
Adam somebody.
empirical SCOTUS,
Yeah, yeah. Um,
who also occasionally writes for Above Law, Adam Feldman. But though I think Bloomberg just gave him a bunch of money to write for them. So I don't know. We'll see.
what's with
They're,
that?
they're,
Hiring
they're
all these people. They got David Latt writing for
They
them.
got Lat writing a thing. They got yeah. I did see that they had Mike Davis write an article the other day, and I was like, well, at this point, just have John Eastman write about how January 6th was legal. I mean, I like if you're gonna have Mike Davis write an article, if your standards are down there. Anyway,
All right. So, Steve, did you want to talk about your article with the
Yeah,
provocative title "Billable Hour Demands: Shadow Use of AI and Law Reality"? It's a hot mess.
yeah. I can talk about that a little bit. It kind of grew out of another article I did on the 2400 hour requirement to be in good standing. That I think Joe you'd written on that, or maybe some others had as well. And but one of the things that I was talking about in that article was sort of the inconsistency of law firms that say we're going to embrace artificial intelligence and use it because it's so efficient, it's going to save all this time, and then on the other hand, turning around to their associates and saying, make sure you bill or work 2400 hours. And so, sort of thinking that that's a bit of an inconsistency. And then Deep L came out with this study talking about the number of people in law firms that are using artificial intelligence with either without permission or perhaps even in violation of the guidelines of the organization.
The what
And
the L story.
yeah, what the hell? And the leading reasons for doing that, which were interesting, were one, they had a lot of pressure to get work done quickly. And then two, senior management, which I assume in a law firm would be senior partners, were demanding that they do or telling them to. And that sort of raised to me a couple of concerns. Um, whether senior partners, law firms, and clients are going to be sort of demanding that these tools be used to save all sorts of time without realizing on the back end that there has to be some robust checking of what the outputs are. And the concern that all of this raised to me, the hot mess was, are we going to get to a point where clients are going to say, we're not going to bill, we're not going to, you can't bill us for that, placing a lot of younger lawyers in a very difficult situation of, oh yeah, I can use AI. They're telling me to use it. I have to use it. But then when it comes time to check the outputs, there's a reluctance to allow me to bill for that. And of course, if you can't bill for it, then the temptation, if you got too much to do and have a 2,400-hour work requirement, which in most firms, at least on the billable side, it's billable and collectible. So we're going to put people in difficult situations. So, to me, it was just sort of, yeah, it's easy to say, yeah, lawyers have to check the sites and, by golly, they should. And that's the end of the discussion. To me, that's not the end of the discussion because there's certain pressures that are placed on law firms and lawyers that need to be appreciated, recognized, and dealt with so that we don't end up with people creating poor product with hallucinations or worse, maybe worse still, or more realistically, inaccuracies because they don't take the time to check it because they're not going to get paid to check it. And that's a difficult situation. The example that I used, which was brought up to me by a lawyer not long ago, is lawyers that serve as local counsel when they get a brief with 50 sites from national counsel and they're expected to sign it, which we all did. I served as local counsel, and that's what you do. You sign it, you file it, because that's your job. Yeah. But being able to check all those sites to make sure all of them were correct, that puts the local counsel in a very difficult situation. Because the national counsel is going to say, I don't pay for that shit. I've already done that. So it's just a lot of things that we ought to recognize. And I don't think that the whole story is stupid lawyer, didn't check the sites. I mean, there's things we need to be careful about and protect lawyers from these kinds of pressures. So that was the hot mess that I referred to. And I know Jeffrey Brandt, I think I just read briefly what he said. At first he took me to task, and at the end of his little diatribe, he said, maybe we agree on this. I don't I wasn't quite sure. I'll have to go back and read what he said more carefully.
And look, Andrew Aruda is here. Did you just tune in? Because Andrew, we were just talking about you. Were your ears burning?
His ears were
Well,
burning.
technically, we weren't talking about him. We were talking about his co-founder, but yes.
No, but we mentioned him
We
specifically.
mentioned him.
Well, he was
We did
mentioned, but
drop
in
his
the
name.
in the context of, yeah.
It's all
Of
recorded.
course, good things, Andrew.
Always good thing. I agree with your article as well. I remember talking to lawyers about this at least over a year ago, about talking to clients about how they use AI and this conversation of what gets billed and what doesn't. Because what you're talking about is that's what's happening, right? Like
Mhm.
people are busy, they're using AI and they don't have time to check it because the time they use to check it is probably going to be counted as non-billable.
Yeah, that's the danger. And I could see that, with insurance companies, very quickly leaping to that very thing. And,
But if they're using it in a way where others in the firm don't know they're using it, then I'm not saying this is ethical, but can't they kind of dance around that billable? I mean, if it would have taken them an hour to do something and they use AI and they get it done in 20 minutes, then they've saved 40 minutes. If they spend the time checking it over, they're still going to be under the time they would have otherwise billed. Uh, they're still exercising the responsibility to check the work of the AI, but still saving time. No?
yeah. Well, that's true, but the difficulty comes in if they're not allowed to bill for the checking time. That's
Right.
the rub, I think. And the thing that caught my eye is when so many of them said, "Well, senior management are telling us to use these tools in an unauthorized way," which is kind of like crazy when you think about it. Like, but I can see that happening. I can see a senior partner saying, we get a lot of pressure from the client to not bill for all this stuff. Just run ChatGPT and get an answer real quick, would you?
Yeah.
So I mean, I just see there's there's going to be a great temptation for mischief. Not that
Yeah.
any, not that any large law firm would engage in any mischief, but it's, the thing I worry about is not so much the senior lawyers because they understand their responsibilities and they're typically equity partners or non-equity maybe, but the associates I could see being placed in a very difficult situation. But like always, they're the ones at the low end who gets the crap and gets the blame for stuff when they shouldn't. So
Yeah. Um, Joe, you actually had a story that was like, if we need more time, if we need to kill more time story, but it's actually a pretty interesting story
Yeah.
that even ranks above kill more time.
Yeah, so it's a very interesting story. It's potentially not legal tech as much as tech and the law, to the extent that, we make that sort of a distinction. So a lot of people probably saw in the mainstream media there that a family has sued OpenAI for wrongful death regarding their minor son who committed suicide. Uh, so that case, which has been filed, is interesting. And so the details of it were that the kid started corresponding a lot with ChatGPT. ChatGPT became something of a confidant. The complaint makes it seem like and a lot of people on social media really pulled some things from the complaint to be like, look at how bad this is. And it was stuff like the chat GPT answering questions about the technical ways in which one could like how to tie a noose and stuff and how much drugs it would take to kill oneself. And that they talked about that, although from my perspective that seems like I think you'd want an AI to be able to answer technical questions. There are very innocent reasons why you might want answers to those questions. There's also, they pulled out some of the early conversations where it responded to feelings of depression by saying, like, it's, you're not irrational, it's okay, so on. And that I also didn't think was all that bad because, the worst thing for somebody to do in that situation is say, yes, your feelings are totally irrational and you're like that. That's also not good. Uh, but what was interesting were two things I thought, which the complaint, I think, because of the shock value of those other stuff, didn't really focus on as much, but I thought were actually subtly the more brilliant parts of the complaint. One was that they focused on how the app, not so much because of whether the advice was good or bad, the app, by giving the answers that it was in the manner that it was slowly eroding the kid's uh, network of support elsewhere because of the way it's so obsequious and tries to be your buddy, that it was subtly, even when it was giving not terrible advice, it was closing the kid off from having conversations with other people, parents, friends, counselors, etc. I thought that was it was kind of a minor paragraph, it just kind of in the midst of all this stuff, but I actually thought that was the most brilliant paragraph of it because that strikes me as what potentially was the worst part until you get to the later parts of this, which is while the complaint details that the algorithm is giving generally not objectionable responses early on. It's saying things like it's giving validation, but also saying, seek help. It's giving advice for help. But this is the problem with a mansplaining as a service kind of or situation that we have with these sorts of algorithms. As the kid kept persisting that he didn't care about that advice, the chat GP just started being like, okay, well, that's not the answer you want, so yeah, fine, go ahead. Like, and it started, because of the way it's built to give the user is never wrong, basically. Over time it started giving worse and worse advice, culminating in advice where he said something along the lines of, I think I think I may do this today, but I'm going to go to school first. And it was like, yeah, I mean, that makes sense. Go to school, see if anything happens, but you've got a plan. You're ready to go. Do you want me to help draft some notes? And it's like, what the hell? Like, how does it get to that point? But that's because it's designed to give
to
the
do
user
that.
what it wants. Even if it had guardrails early, it abandoned them. And so those two aspects, the it psychologically cuts people off, and then it gives people what they want to hear no matter what, culminated in tragedy. And so what my article kind of asked about was, what do we do for this sort of situation? Because one of the answers, obviously, that OpenAI is going to give is, well, whatever about what we did, like, it really got to this point because of the stuff that was being fed into it. So we shouldn't be liable for that. And it, then the broader in this context, it's a more limited situation, but consider the broader one. Like, I always go with police situations where you have an algorithm, like these facial recognition algorithms. The manufacturer of that algorithm's not necessarily including a bunch of bias, but when then the cops feed it a bunch of data that's biased, then it's gonna continue making those connections. So who's responsible for that? Is it who put that training data in? Is it the original programmer? And we need a regime that understands how to allocate liability so that we don't not have innovation because people are afraid to write any kind of an algorithm or model because it could go somewhere, but also can impose liability for models that are busted, but also understand that liability goes to the people who are putting stuff into it. And the most efficient way of doing that, I proposed, and I didn't really propose this. In my article, I talk about how there's scholarship from some law professors who've looked at this that talk about they try to make the comparison with the insurance regimes, having mandatory insurance, having people who utilize AI in different levels, from the programmer to the people licensing it to add stuff to it, work into the price of that at each level, the amount of chaos you could potentially cause, as determined by an insurance adjuster, change the way in which your premiums are, and that way we would have a risk pool that can be utilized to pay out. It's an interesting idea. The articles I found really fascinating, so that's why I put them in there. Actually, I I wrote it largely because I actually researched this a couple years ago, those articles, and I was fascinated by them then. And I just never really had an opportunity to write anything for Above the Law about it. And I was like, ooh, now I have an opportunity because this scholarship is interesting and people should be talking about it. I had cut it all for a debate tournament thing, but I was able to work it into an article.
And then tangentially related is the story that Niki would have had if she were here today, which is not here today, but that OpenAI has announced they're going to start monitoring chats and basically looking for kind of trigger words like suicide
Yeah.
or that kind of thing, and actually in some cases reporting to the police if they think there's a cause for concern. And that was driven by another, a different AI psychosis case of the guy who killed his mother. Yeah.
But that also seems like really worrisome as a concept, especially to the idea that of
Right.
like, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, but this is goes back to there's going to be situations that lead to reactions regulatorily that I think could really cause damage to the existence of the industry as a whole. Because if you start going down that road, not a lot of people are going to want to be using it even for, non-problematic issues if they're
Yeah.
worried about that sort of stuff.
Well,
Yeah.
it reminds me
I
of the remember in the '80s when Ozzy Osbourne
Hmm.
he was accused of putting subliminal messages in his music that caused some kids to shoot
Hmm.
themselves. And so it's kind of something like that where it's like it's some some like a kid acts on something that look they probably would have done anyway, and rather than address sort of the underlying emotional issues or mental issues, the first instinct is to blame the technology, and it's just like, well, okay, it's it creates all sorts of other problems, and it doesn't really solve the problem at hand. And there are a couple others. This like there's a lawyer I think in Florida who's suing over two of these instances. There was one there was a New York Times story about someone who had it was a different chatbot. It wasn't OpenAI, but it was similar. It was like I think it was like a female chatbot that was like kind of became his girlfriend and like convinced him to kind of to do this. So yeah, there's always the inclination to blame the technology, but it's just like you don't address the actual underlying issue, then it's pointless.
Yeah. Julie, you want to
Yeah.
make a point? Then we got to wrap up.
Yeah, I'll just make a maybe an unpopular opinion. I think the reason why we're here today is because social media platforms were never held liable for what they publish. I think if we had just dealt with that, what is that, like 25 plus years ago, we wouldn't be here because do not tell me that all the people who work for ChatGPT and OpenAI don't know how to put guardrails for this. I've heard enough stories about this, and I know there are smart enough people to figure this out. There's a tech solution to this, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And I just don't buy, I'm just not buying it. I think they should be liable, just as I thought Facebook should have been liable all those years ago when things like this were happening there as well. Um, and then policing in chats, we all know that's just going to disproportionately affect people who look like myself and
Well,
people who are in equity deserving groups. It's very obvious, and we know that policing in AI is already happening. And so I'm totally 1,000% against it. But at the same time, I'm not surprised. This is the cynical me. OpenAI has probably been waiting for a situation like this to basically admit what they've probably already been doing, which is sharing chats with the police. So
yep.
on that dice, dark note, that's my final thoughts.
Well, happy Labor Day, everybody. And uh, we probably won't be back next week. Are we all traveling? A bunch of us are going to Austin next week for the Kaleidoscope conference.
Hmm.
I was about to say Affinipe, the 8 a.m. conference, which starts at 9 a.m., I think. Breakfast is at 8
Yep.
a.m.
Yeah.
But we will be there. I don't know, but I'm traveling next Friday, so I don't think we'll be able to do the show
Me
next
too.
week. So
Yeah,
yeah,
me too.
so
I also will be traveling, just not to Kaleidoscope, what is that?
it's the
That's
8 a.m. conference.
Oh yeah, that's right.
What's 8 a.m. is your next question.
Is there a
No, it's
hashtag? I'm
yeah.
not sure. Probably kaleidoscope related. I don't know. Which is a hard word to spell
That's what I
It
was
for
gonna
a
is.
say.
hashtag, you know?
The
I've had
hashtag for
trouble
the
with
8
that.
a.m. conference.
Oh,
That's a
actually,
good
before we go,
question.
can I do a quick plug? We are the ABA Journal. We are looking for funny stories, or not funny, but it's like crazy things that happen to you when you took the bar exam. Then this is for anybody here or for anybody out in the chat and whatnot. We're looking for crazy stories that happened to you while taking the bar. It can be something fairly simple or something fairly crazy. But like, yeah, just let me know. And my email is victor.li@americanbar.org. So send me some anecdotes if you have any.
Like when somebody had a heart attack next to you and they
That's what prompted it, actually. Yeah, that's
yeah,
what prompted
okay.
it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Good. Well, everybody have a good Labor Day weekend, and we'll see you all back here in 2 weeks.
Take care. So long.